Good day and welcome to what will be the 10th in our series of videos of starting a new plot, which is a playlist on our channel. As you will know if you've been watching us for a while, we started on this half plot about a year ago. We became tenants of it at the beginning of October, but for various reasons, including the fact that the then tenant hadn't fully vacated it, we didn't actually start work on this plot until the middle of December last year. So that's 2019. If you are starting a new plot, then please do look at our playlist about starting a new plot, because there's lots of good hints and tips in there for doing that. What I'm going to do now is just take us back a year to, or just over a year, to the 4th of December, when I gave a brief tour of this new plot. This is the plot that we're moving to. So it goes up to the edge here, along. We already have a growing plot down by this shed, in front of this shed. That is a third of a standard plot. This one here is a half of a standard plot, and it's right next to this, which is the original plot that we got. Oh, we're in our 4th growing year now. So we got this about 3 years, 2 months ago. So we've had 3 full growing years here. So I thought it'd be worthwhile in this first sort of full tour for this plot, if you like, to just take you through what is here. We've done that on some of the tours, our monthly tours, but I thought it'd be worthwhile just giving you a view. It's very low sunshine, so there's quite a lot of long shadows, as you can see. So our plot begins just here, goes up to this post, which has got a cup on it, then right along behind the shed, then coming behind that green shed, which has had a lick of paint. Up front here, we're going right along. There's a rose bush. There's a rather decrepit compost bin. And there we are, that's the corner. So the plot goes up behind that shed. And there's about another metre at the side of that shed, which we'll have a look at. Beautiful blue sky. Right, then we come to these beds. There's a whole host of, well, what is a whole host? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jiggity beds. Not really any rhyme or reason to them. And all of these are going to come out. This one here and here. And this bed here, another one over here. They will come out and we'll reuse the wood somewhere else. There's quite a lot of weeds in here. This is actually, I think, a strawberry bed, though it's got a whole load of weed in it. So yeah, it's quite a good bit of space. There's already some cover on here, but this is felt roofing, which really shouldn't be put on the ground because it'll just deteriorate. And then what I have done is I've moved 2 of our beds, edge beds, from the lower area where we're vacating to this top area. So it's my intention that we have 2 2.4 metre long beds by 1.2 metre wide beds along here. So that will give a 4.8 by 1.2 metre growing space. And then we'll have a path, and then we'll have another set of beds, a path, and then another set of beds, a path, another set of beds. I hope we'll be able to get 5 sets of long beds in here. We'll definitely get 4, but I hope we'll be able to get 5. Then there is a little pathway already, which takes you to just the side of the shed. This in the middle is a grapevine that we'll be taking out, and we will have a flower border in here, this area, and then this area where my shadow is over at the moment has got quite a lot of raspberry fruit in, and we will be taking that out and giving it a really good clean and then putting it back down. So this is going to be a soft fruit bed, and then the edge of the plot is along these posts. We can't really use the area between as a growing space because we need to keep a pathway between these plots. If we come back to where the camera was about a year ago, you can see that a lot has changed. These beds have been pretty productive for us over the last growing year. The vinyl bed over here, which we were unable to get sorted before the last growing season, was basically our tomato growing area this year, and those were all in grow bags. And then the area down here that you can see that has white vinyl on it is another area that we weren't able to fully utilize in the last growing year and need to sort out in the coming months to be able to use it in the coming growing year. Just spinning the camera around a little, this is our flower border bed that we put in, mainly to have colours and to entice pollinators. And this area here is going to be our fruit bed, where we will have josta berries, raspberries, blackcurrants and gooseberries. Again, this area here is one that we weren't able to sort out fully last year. So that's another job that needs to be done for this year's growing season. Let me just talk a little bit about what did happen this year. We've had on this half plot a pretty productive year last year. I want it to be more productive than it has been, which is why I want to get the vinyl areas sorted and also the fruit bed behind me. But actually, I'm pretty happy with the harvest that we did get. One of the things that has been a challenge is the amount of perennial weeds that were on this plot when we took it over. It really hadn't been maintained for, well, at least 3, if not 4 years, I think. And one of the issues is that because we went for no dig and because we didn't have the time to cover the whole site with black tarpaulin or something similar and obstruct light for a whole year without us growing anything on it, those weeds came through. So if you've watched our earlier videos, you'll know that under these edge beds that we just looked at, there's 3 thick layers of cardboard directly onto the ground. Then the edge beds on top of that cardboard, so the cardboard overlaps the edge beds, and then compost within the edge beds. What has happened is the perennial weeds, particularly sankfoil and couch grass a little bit, and bindweed quite a bit, have come through those 3 layers of cardboard. As I say, if we could have just said we're not going to grow on this area for a year or 18 months, I would have just covered the whole thing in black plastic, black tarpaulin, which we don't have anyway, and just let no light get to those layers of weeds. However, we needed to produce on this plot. How I've remedied the issue of the sancfoil and the bindweed coming through is I have forked over two of the beds. So the beds that we have the onions in at the moment and the beds that we have the garlic in, I have forked those over to a fork's depth. I did that maybe about 2 months ago, obviously before the onion sets and the garlic went in. And I got as much bindweed and as much sancfoil and as much couch grass out as I possibly could. And will I need to do that again? I don't know. I hope not for a year or so at least. But you know what? What that has done is it's got the really bad perennial roots out, and they've gone into our perennial compost bin. What that has done, of course, is that forking over has given an opportunity for seeds that were in that soil anyway, not perennial weeds, but annual weeds, to see the light and start growing. So one thing I do need to do over the coming weeks is to get on my hands and knees on those beds or next to the beds and hand weed them. Because one thing that onions and garlic do not like is being crowded out by any type of weed. But that's what happens when you turn over soil that hasn't been turned over for a long time and hasn't been maintained, more importantly, for a long time. The seeds, the weed seeds that are in that, see the light, literally, well, not literally, but virtually, and decide to grow. What I will do over the coming growing year is I will be forking over more of the beds. So the bed that the beetroot and turnips are in at the moment, which is sort of coming to an end of its life, or the turnips and beetroot are, because we're using them, that will, I think, be the next bed to be forked over. And then will come the brassica bed that is behind you at the moment. So would I have done things differently? No. Actually, when I was looking at those weeds, the sancfoil in particular over the summer, it was really frustrating, but we got really decent harvests, and I've been able to remedy the process that we did. When we did this process on the bed that we had further down on the plot, that we gave up to move to the area I'm sitting on at the moment, that plot was virgin ground. It really was. It's where the communal shed had been, and it was just grass, and no dig worked incredibly well there, even in its first year. 3 layers of thick cardboard, the edge beds on top, compost within those beds, and we grew really, really well on that plot. The only reason we gave up that plot is because with the plot behind me and that plot, which is, let's say, 50, 60 meters away, there was so much work between the two plots, and just watering these 2 plots that I'm sitting on at the moment, which are now 1 plot, watering these together takes half as much time as having to go 50 meters down there and water that plot. So it was a good move for us to come here. It's been challenging. Don't get me wrong. You know, it has been challenging. Taking on a really unkempt plot is always a challenge. But with effort and time, you can get on top of it and grow really, really well. And we've seen many of our subscribers this year saying, this is our first growing year and we followed what you've done, and we found it really inspirational, and we've done well ourselves, which is fantastic. You know, it really is. So I've made a couple of notes. Yeah, the vinyl that we used, it was really interesting because where the vinyl, the printed side of the vinyl is dark, it didn't let light through, but where it's lighter in color, it let light through. So when I lifted the vinyl that I put down about a year ago, The areas where the vinyl had a lighter printing, those areas still had weeds that were growing, and grass, in fact, that was growing underneath. So what I would have done, and this I know was mentioned by Izzy at the time when we lifted the vinyl up for the first time, is I would have put I could, and I would in future put cardboard down underneath the vinyl and then put the vinyl on top. So giving it a waterproofing layer with the vinyl and a blackout layer, if you like, with the cardboard. So that is something that I would do differently for a bed that I couldn't get onto and utilize straight away, but wanted to grow on top of. As I said, we grew our tomatoes in bags on top of that very successfully. But yeah, basically everything that is already in this playlist, I would do again. I I would do exactly the same again. It's the remedial work that I didn't expect, i.e. the forking over after a year to get those additional perennial weeds out. That's what I hadn't expected. But the only way to go about not having to do that remedial work is either to dig the whole area that you're going to grow and make sure you get every perennial weed you can out, or to cover for a good 18 months in something that is going to block out all light so that nothing underneath can grow. And even then, there will still be some perennial weeds that when you're handling the soil, you will need to take out. But basically, I'm really happy with everything I did here. I'm going to talk more about layouts of beds in a later video. And if you're watching A Week at the Plot, you will have seen that there was a couple of segments last week where we talked about which direction our plots face. But actually, when you're looking at an allotment plot, very often that isn't quite so much of a worry that your plot faces south, because allotment sites are generally pretty open. And the only thing you need to worry about is your structures, your sheds, your polytunnels, where they sit in relation to other people's sheds and polytunnels, and also in relation to trees that might be your boundary. But let me just take you through what we're going to be doing over the coming months on this bit of land. This is one of the areas that we're going to be sorting out over the coming months. We're going to be putting a growing bed underneath this vinyl. Obviously, the vinyl will be removed, but the space that this vinyl is taking up is going to be a ground bed. So it's not going to have any edging and it's not going to be raised in any way. We're going to be planting directly into the ground and seeing how that does for us. We'll obviously be removing the vinyl, marking out the beds, and then giving them a good forking over and digging, though that will be detailed in a later video. The beds are actually going to be a bit narrower than the whole width of this vinyl, because I have decided I'm going to extend these beds, these edge beds here, out to the end of these troughs, which I've been living with now for about 4 to 6 weeks, I think. Now, the extensions are going to be ground beds as well. They won't be edged with vertical wood like these are. I think we're just going to put bricks as edging around this area. The reason that I don't want to have edged beds here which have height to them is because I want to be able to use the wheelbarrow really easily. And if these beds are ground level, it'll be much more easier to use the beds around tight corners. So yes, each of these two here, and potentially this bed further up here where the strawberry planter is, will be coming out by 80 centimetres. What that means is that we need to have a decent path here, the same width as between these paths here, of 40 or 50 centimetres. So this edging will have to, or the edge of the bed won't be here, it will be further in here. Again, we'll be marking that out with twine and pegs when we do it. Let's go and have a look at the other vinyl area. Our other vinyl area, basically we're going to do very similar to the ground underneath this vinyl. We're going to be forking it over and digging where necessary. We have a lavender here that needs a bit of TLC at the moment. Then we're going to sink this in as a pond, a wildlife pond at the end. And then we're going to have some rhubarb in this area. So this will become effectively a perennial bed. This is where we have a cardoon. In front of that, we're going to have a above ground wildlife pond. And then beyond both of those, between the cardoon and the compost bins here, this is where we're going to have beds, or a bed of perennial kale. So that will be interesting to do, because this will be the first time I've put a perennial bed in. And along the edge, I'm hoping that we'll be able to have a little border for flowers as well. So we will see how that goes. Again, we'll do this in detail in a separate video. Back up to the fruit bed. This is the area for our fruit, as we said earlier. Again, we couldn't get into this ground to prepare the ground for the fruit last year. So everything has been in tubs, as you can see. When we do prepare the ground, we will be putting all of this fruit in directly into the soil, and then we may be membraning it with cardboard and then covering it in some wood chips. But we'll see if we can get wood chips in order to do that from a tree surgeon rather than buying, because we don't want to spend money buying wood chips. These two tubs here, which have gooseberries in, will be taken back to bare root. As you can see, there's quite a lot of weed in those two tubs, and taking them back to bare root literally means removing all of the soil so that we can remove all of the weeds, so that all we're left with is the growing branches above and bare roots below, and then they will be planted directly into this bed. There's a bit of an icy wind blowing out there at the moment. Not a straw, actually it's more of a breeze than a wind, but it's quite icy, so I've come in here just for a little bit of protection. I hope you found this video useful. It's basically a look back at how the plot was 12 months ago, the work that we have achieved, and a brief discussion about the harvest that we have achieved over the past year, and also some of the remedial work that has gone on to alleviate the issues that we have had with perennial weeds, particularly cinquefoil, couchgrass and bindweed, which is pretty substantial on this plot. As I say, with having to have a harvest from this site this year, this plot this year, I wouldn't have actually changed the way I have done anything. If we could have left this whole plot fallow for a year or 2 years and covered in a black plastic, and made sure that no light got to any of the perennial weeds, then I would have done that. But you know what? Many of us don't have the opportunity to do that. So yeah, I'm happy with what I've done, how I've done it, and how I am remedying situations that I'm finding challenging. The coming months will be different. We've talked about what's going to happen. Some of those beds are going to be ground beds. In fact, all of them apart from the fruit bed will be ground beds. I'm really pleased I've now decided that I am going to extend those edge beds, again with ground level beds. I need to source bricks for what I want to do. I need to source a bit more cardboard for what I want to do. But most of what we're doing is going to be time and effort and elbow grease, if you like, rather than spending money or throwing money at the plot. So we'll leave it there for today. We'll be back. Which is going to be the first bed we're going to do? I think it's most probably going to be the vinyl bed where we have the tomatoes growing, because that's going to require me to put out some lines, to measure the beds up, to look at how they will fit with the extension of the edge beds that we're going to put in. So at the moment, for me, that seems to be the sensible first step. So I will see you with that relatively soon, in early-ish January, I think. If you don't watch any of our other videos before you see this, have a very happy and quiet and hopefully peaceful and restful New Year start. And I'll see you for a bit of energetic forking over and measuring out and all of that early in the new year. Bye.